I look back at the beginning of my Center's Day journey, I realized something that shook me to the core. I wasn't being held back by the world, by other people, or even by circumstances. I was being held back by myself, and not even by who I was in that present moment, but by the conditioning of who I used to be. That's the paradox of change. We think we are making choices freely, yet most of the time our choices are repetitions of the past. We repeat thoughts, repeat habits, repeat emotions, and we wonder why life feels stuck in the same loop, you know? You see, the mind is a powerful architect, but it can either build a palace or a prison, depending on the blueprints we allow it to follow. Most of us don't even realize we are operating on subconscious programs, patterns formed through childhood, culture, environment, and repeated experience. They run in the background like invisible scripts dictating our behavior. And the tragedy is that we confuse those scripts for who we are. But they're not who we are. They're simply stories we've rehearsed for so long that they've become our identity, you know? The first step to becoming limitless was realizing that I had to rewrite those scripts. I couldn't keep thinking the same thoughts and expect a different life. If I kept waking up with the same emotions, if I kept telling myself the same stories about what I could and couldn't do, then my future would just be a replay of my past. And isn't that what most people experience? A year goes by, then 5 years, then 10, and not much changes except the calendar. Why? Because nothing changed in the mind that designed those years in the first place. So I began with awareness. I started noticing the thoughts I carried in silence. Thoughts of doubt, thoughts of fear, thoughts that whispered, "You can't, you're not ready, you've failed before." And I asked myself, if these thoughts were actual people speaking to me, would I choose to spend time with them? The answer was obvious, no. Yet I had been letting them live in my head rent-free for years. That was the moment I understood that reprogramming the mind isn't about forcing positivity. It's about no longer tolerating the toxicity of your old conditioning. From there, I practiced replacing those thoughts with new ones, deliberately, consistently, almost like training a muscle. At first, it felt artificial, almost like I was pretending. But isn't it true that everything new feels unnatural until it becomes familiar? Walking was once unnatural. Speaking was once unnatural. Even believing in yourself can feel foreign if you've rehearsed doubt for too long. But the brain doesn't care whether a thought is true or not. It only cares whether it's repeated. And what you repeat, you reinforce. Each morning, I reminded myself that I wasn't a prisoner of yesterday. Each day, I focused on gratitude, possibility, and potential. Not because everything was perfect, but because I wanted my mind to stop obsessing over what was wrong and start searching for what was possible. And slowly, something shifted. I started catching myself before spiraling into old patterns. I began making decisions from a place of vision instead of fear. And I noticed that opportunities seemed to appear, not because the world had changed, but because I was finally able to see what had always been there. The truth is, mental reprogramming isn't just about thinking better thoughts. It's about breaking the cycle of unconscious living. When you realize that 500% of your day is spent repeating yesterday's behaviors, yesterday's emotions, yesterday's routines, you also realize that unless you disrupt that cycle, you can't create anything new. Change demands interruption. It demands conscious choice. And when you step into that space, even if only for a few moments each day, you open the door to a life beyond limitation. This is why I say the first step in becoming limitless is not about doing more, but about thinking differently. It's about refusing to let your past dictate your future. It's about understanding that your mind can be your servant or your master, and the choice is yours. Once I grasped that, everything else in the journey Discipline, embracing discomfort, alignment, fell into place. Because without changing the mind, none of those practices can truly last. So if there's one insight I'd leave you with, it's this: the greatest prison you'll ever escape is the prison of your own limiting beliefs. And the key has always been in your hands. And when the mind begins to shift, when you start loosening the grip of old beliefs and step into new ways of thinking, you quickly realize something: vision alone is not enough. Inspiration feels good in the moment, but it fades. Motivation sparks like a flame, but it dies when the winds of life grow strong. What sustains change, what transforms vision into reality, is discipline. You know, discipline is not a punishment, though many people treat it that way. It is not about restricting life or cutting away joy. It is about directing energy. Think of it this way: water flowing everywhere has no force, but water channeled becomes a river, and that river can carve valleys, move turbines, and generate power. Discipline is that channel for your energy, for your focus, for your dreams. Without it, even the most powerful vision gets lost in the noise of everyday distractions. During my Sensor's Day journey, I discovered that discipline wasn't about intensity. It was about consistency. Most of us try to change our lives with sudden bursts of effort: 3 days of extreme workouts, a week of strict routines, or a short-lived obsession with a new habit. But real transformation comes not from what you do occasionally, but from what you do consistently. And consistency requires discipline. It's the decision to show up, especially on the days you don't feel like it. I realized that discipline is essentially a dialogue between the present self and the future self. In every moment of choice, you are asking, do I want the comfort of now or the growth of tomorrow? And the answer you choose determines who you are becoming. Skecting one morning routine may not seem like much, but it plants a seed. Repeating it plants roots. Soon enough, the tree of habit grows and it shapes the landscape of your life. But here's the interesting part. Discipline isn't about force, it's about alignment. When your mind is reprogrammed to believe in your potential, discipline stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like an act of devotion. You no longer drag yourself toward your goals. You're pulled by them. You stop asking, do I have to do this? And you start realizing, I get to do this. The very act of staying consistent becomes a privilege because it not keeps you connected to the vision of who you are becoming. Of course, there were moments during my journey where I wanted to quit, days where resistance was louder than resolve. But that's exactly why discipline matters. It holds you steady when emotions try to pull you away. Think about it. Emotions are temporary, motivation is temporary, but discipline is eternal. Because it doesn't rely on how you feel, it relies on who you've chosen to be. And the beauty of discipline is that it compounds. Each day you honor your commitments. No matter how small, you strengthen a deeper identity. The identity of someone who follows through. That identity then creates, and momentum is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. It builds confidence, and confidence fuels action, which builds even more confidence. What begins as a single disciplined act becomes a cycle of transformation. There's also a spiritual dimension to discipline. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you are in essence declaring to yourself and the universe, I value my future more than my comfort. I value growth more than ease. I value becoming more than staying the same. And when you declare that consistently, doors open, opportunities appear, not because they weren't there before, but because you finally aligned your choices with your vision. Discipline is not about controlling every detail of life. It is about controlling the only thing you truly can: your decisions, the way you wake up, the way you carry yourself, the way you invest your time. And in those decisions, your future is quietly being built. Over sensor days, I saw this truth unfold in real time. My vision started to take form, not because I was dreaming harder, but because I was acting consistently, you know? So if the first step to a limitless life is reprogramming your mind, the second is giving that new mind a structure to build on. And discipline is that structure. Without it, vision dissolves into wishful thinking. With it, vision takes on flesh and bone. You know, at the end of the day, discipline is not about sacrifice. It is about freedom. The freedom to live a life designed by choice, not by chance. The freedom to look back and say, I built this step by step, decision by decision. Um, you know, and that's the truth I carried forward. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you know you can become. One of the most powerful realizations I had during this journey is that growth never comes wrapped in comfort. In fact, comfort is the greatest seducer, the silent trap that convinces us we're safe when, in reality, we're stuck. If discipline provides the structure for transformation, then discomfort is the compass that points us toward it. Wherever there is resistance, wherever there is fear, wherever there is hesitation, that's usually the very place you must go if you want to evolve. You know, for years, I had equated discomfort with danger. If something felt uncomfortable, I thought it was a sign to step back, to protect myself. But over these Thanster days, I came to see discomfort differently. Discomfort isn't the enemy. It's the signal. It's life's way of showing you the edges of your current identity, the boundary line of who you've been. And here's the truth. Unless you step past that line, you'll never discover who you can become. You think of it like working out. When you lift a weight heavier than you're used to, your muscles burn, they tear, they resist. It's painful. But that discomfort isn't punishment. It's adaptation. It's the sign that growth is happening, that strength is being built. The same principle applies to every area of life. The uncomfortable conversation you've been avoiding is the very one that could free you. The unfamiliar skill you've been postponing could be the one that unlocks opportunity. The habit that feels awkward at first may be the one that rewrites your future, you know? But here's the paradox. Most people spend their lives designing routines that avoid discomfort at all costs. We crave certainty, predictability, ease. And yet, in chasing comfort, we rob ourselves of transformation. We settle into what is known, and what is known becomes a cage. Comfort slowly kills ambition. It whispers, stay here. You're fine, while life outside that circle keeps passing by. You know, during my journey, I learned to treat discomfort as a teacher. Instead of resisting it, I leaned into it. Each time I felt the pull of resistance. Whether it was waking up earlier than usual, facing a personal fear, or staying disciplined when my mind begged me to quit, I reminded myself, this is where growth lives. And every single time I discovered that the pain I anticipated was greater than the discomfort I actually felt. That's the illusion of fear. It magnifies the obstacle until you step into it, and then it crumbles. You know, it also became clear to me that discomfort isn't just physical or external. Some of the deepest discomfort is internal. The silence of sitting with your own thoughts, the unease of breaking away from old habits, the vulnerability of admitting truths you've ignored. These are not easy confrontations, but they are necessary, because the discomfort you resist most is often the very doorway to the breakthrough you've been waiting for. You know? And here's what happens when you embrace discomfort consistently. It expands your threshold for life. What once felt impossible becomes normal. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. Each step into discomfort stretches the borders of your identity until you realize that the limits you once believed in were never real to begin with. But embracing discomfort doesn't mean chasing pain recklessly. It's not about suffering for the sake of suffering. It's about being willing to trade short-term ease for long-term transformation. It's about recognizing that growth and comfort cannot coexist and consciously choosing growth. The discomfort of discipline, of vulnerability, of learning, of persistence. These are not obstacles. They are investments. Investments that pay dividends in strength, freedom, and self-mastery. Right, Kate. As my journey unfolded, I realized something that tied all the pieces together. No matter how much you reprogram your mind, no matter how disciplined you become, no matter how willing you are to embrace discomfort, if your life is fragmented, you'll always feel incomplete. True transformation happens when the mind, the body, and the spirit move together in alignment. That's when life stops being a struggle and starts to feel like flow. For so long, I treated these parts of myself as separate. I believed the mind was for thinking. The body was just a vehicle. And the spirit, well, I didn't give it much thought at all. But as I went deeper into this process, I noticed something powerful. Whenever my mind was sharp but my body was neglected, I felt drained, unfocused. Whenever my body was strong but my mind was clouded with negativity, I felt restless. And whenever I ignored the spirit, the deeper sense of meaning and connection, everything else felt hollow. No matter how much progress I made, it became clear that alignment is not about choosing one part of ourselves over another. It's about integration. The mind sets the vision. The body provides the energy to pursue it. And the spirit gives the journey meaning. Leave out any one of these, and the wheel of transformation wobbles. But bring them into harmony, and suddenly, the entire vehicle of your life moves smoothly forward. On a practical level, I began aligning my mind through daily practices of focus and intentional thought. I trained it not only to imagine the future, but to dwell in gratitude, to consistently seek possibility. For the body, I committed to movement, nutrition, and rest, not as chores, but as acts of respect. I realized that the body is not something to push until it breaks. It's the very instrument through which vision is expressed. A strong body creates a strong mind, and a strong mind gives the body purpose. And then there was the spirit. This was perhaps the most overlooked part of my journey before these Thursdays, but it turned out to be the most important. Spirit isn't about religion or doctrine. It's about connection. Connection to something greater than yourself, whether that's purpose, love, humanity, or the infinite intelligence that holds this universe together. Without spirit, success becomes shallow. With it, even small victories become profound. I started each day with stillness, a moment of silence where I could simply connect. Sometimes it was through meditation, sometimes through reflection, sometimes just by breathing deeply and reminding myself that I was more than my thoughts, more than my body, more than my circumstance. And in those moments, I felt alignment, like the different parts of me were no longer pulling in separate directions, but were united in a single movement forward. Right? When mind, body, and spirit are aligned, something extraordinary happens. Life stops feeling forced. Decisions become clearer. Energy feels abundant. You're not constantly fighting against yourself because every part of you is moving with the same intention. That's when discipline no longer feels like a battle, discomfort no longer feels unbearable, and vision no longer feels out of reach. Everything begins to work together, and alignment is contagious. When you live in harmony within yourself, your relationships change, the way you show up in your work changes. The energy you bring into a room changes. People sense it not because you're trying to project it, but because it radiates naturally. Alignment creates authenticity, and authenticity is magnetic. By the end of my sensor days, I realized that becoming limitless isn't about adding more to your life. It's about aligning what you already have. It's not about chasing dozens of external goals, but about ensuring that the deepest parts of you are working as one. When they are, you stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You stop being fragmented and you start becoming whole, you know? And that wholeness is where real power comes from. Not the power to dominate or control, but the power to create, to influence, to inspire. Because when your mind is clear, your body is strong, and your spirit is grounded, you are unstoppable, not in a loud, forceful way, but in a quiet, unshakable way. No. So as this journey closed, I came to understand the limitless life isn't just a matter of mindset or discipline or courage. It's the integration of all three dimensions of who you are. It's living in alignment with your thoughts, your actions, and your deeper sense of purpose, you know? And if there's one truth I carry with me now, it's this: alignment is not a destination. It's a practice. So each day, you choose to bring your mind, body, and spirit into harmony. And each day, that choice makes you more whole, more free, and more limitless than the day before.